Welcome, poetry lovers. This is a session coming out of Edgeworth, Pennsylvania, a small borough down the Ohio River from Pittsburgh, where it's 20 degrees this morning. That's negative 6.5 Celsius, if you're into that sort of thing. I was Christmas gifted by my grandson a master class in poetry, and my teacher in that class is Billy Collins, a former U.S. poet laureate. And if you can call my textbook, this book that I'm going to show you, Billy Collins has referenced it a couple of times in the course. It's called Poetry 180, as you can see. And it is a great collection of contemporary poetry, which would not be used ordinarily in a classroom of poetry. Lamentably, as Collins points out, the audience for poetry in this country is about the same size as the number of people writing poetry. So I guess we're frequently talking to each other, but once in a while, somebody else sneaks in. And the purpose of his Poetry 180 collection was to try to get schools all over the country to read a poem, not to have it as a required course for the students, not something that they would be tested on, but just a little introduction to the day. And I think that was successful up to a point, but I don't know that it's increased the audience for my kind of effort. But in any case, the poems he selected are those which can be grasped by most people who are not poets. And you don't need more than one reading to get the meaning. This doesn't mean they are sort of Dick and Jane type poems, the type of characters you are introduced to when you're first beginning to read. No. They just are not full of the kind of literary allusions you would require a classic Oxford education in order to comprehend. We're going to start with a poem I wrote just this week about the birds and other things I see at my bird feeder. It's called Leftovers. And I got the idea for this from a comment Billy Collins made in the master class, where we were talking about some minor objects, and he says, well, someone has to keep an eye on such things. So I used that phrase of his as the epigram for my poem. The squirrel shows up every day at our bird feeder and finds the leftovers from the birds with whom he coexists. He much prefers the sunflower seeds, or on lucky days, the dried fruit bits dropped from the stirring beaks of cardinals. When he first approached the feeder, he leapt upon the steel post and grasped tightly, scattering the birds in all directions. Unable to move upward, he slowly slid down and met the greeting earth below, discovering edible bits there. Now feeds among the juncos, who prefer the scraps. He is gifted by the tufted titmouse, chickadees in flocks, the Carolina wrens, nifty nuthatches who can stand upside down in the bushes, song sparrows, pine siskins, purple finches, and even the showy goldfinch, now in winter plumage. Jays come. Their weight deflects the spring perch. This is called unnatural selection. They leave with a loud, resentful, screaming clamor. The god of the feeder then comes to fill the larder. The birds wait in the bushes, and even the squirrel stays close. Easy food is never rejected. But when the feeder is removed, they resume their foraging as before. Nobody starves, and there are no demonstrations. Okay, that's Leftovers. It's still in the process of modification, so you never know what it'll turn out to be. But the next poem is a bit more profound poem that I found just this week in the Poetry Magazine website. And the poem is called Enemies, and it's by a fairly well-known poet whose name is Wendell Berry. Enemies. If you are not to become a monster, you must care what they think. If you care what they think, how will you not hate them, and so become a monster of the opposite kind? From where, then, is love to come? Love for your enemy. That is the way of liberty. From forgiveness. Forgiven, they go free of you, and you of them. They are to you as sunlight on a green branch. You must not think of them again, except as monsters like yourself. Pitiable, because unforgiving. That's a poem with a little bit of ironic depth to it, isn't it? Yeah, I like that poem quite a bit. Enemies. And incidentally, on the page, the word enemies is in parentheses. I guess he's trying to tell us something there, isn't he? The next poem is going to be from the Poetry 180 volume that I alluded to a bit earlier. And it's called The Late Passenger. And it's by none other than C.S. Lewis. One of the things that attracted me to it as I went through the book was that C.S. Lewis wrote it. I had no idea before that C.S. Lewis, whose literature I thought I was pretty well acquainted with, had written any poetry. He's famous, isn't he, for his Narnia books, but then I was introduced to him via my still favorite book of his called The Screwtape Letters. And if you haven't read The Screwtape Letters, I would strongly urge you to do so. This poem is called The Late Passenger, and I think it'll help you to understand it if you start right from the beginning, imagining that you're inside Noah's Ark. The sky was low. The sounding rain was falling dense and dark, and Noah's sons were standing at the window of the ark. The beasts were in, but Japhet said, I see one creature more, belated and unmated there, come knocking at the door. Well, let him knock, said Ham, or let him drown, or learn to swim. We're overcrowded as it is. We've got no room for him. And yet it knocks. How terribly it knocks, said Shem. Its feet are hard as horn, but oh, the air that comes from it is sweet. Now hush, said Ham. You'll waken Dad, and once he comes to see what's at the door, it's sure to mean more work for you and me. Noah's voice came roaring from the darkness down below. Some animal is knocking. Take it in before we go. Ham shouted back, and savagely he nudged the other two. That's only Japhet, knocking down a brad nail in his shoe, said Noah. Boys, I hear a noise that's like a horse's hoof, said Ham. Why, that's the dreadful rain that drums upon the roof. Noah tumbled up on deck, and out he put his head. His face went gray, his knees were loosed. He tore his beard and said, Look, look, it would not wait. It turns away. It takes its flight. Fine work you've made of it, my sons, between you all tonight. Even if I could outrun it now, it would not turn again, not now. Our great discourtesy has earned its high disdain. O noble and unmated beast, my sons were all unkind. In such a night, what stable and what manger will you find? O golden hoofs, O cataracts of mane, O nostrils wide with indignation, O the neck wave-arched, the lovely pride. O long shall be the furrows plowed across the hearts of men before it comes to stable and to manger once again. And dark and crooked all the ways in which our race shall walk, and shriveled all their manhood, like a flower with a broken stalk. And all the world, O Ham, may curse the hour when you were born. Because of you, the ark must sail without the unicorn. I think that's a great poem. I think it's a great poem. Okay, what else have I got here? I make notes before I do this program, so sometimes I have to remind myself what's going on. But you can understand that. I hope there is something in these poems we can all relate to, either in our lives or in our fantasies, like, for example, The Late Passenger. Those kinds of relationships are what poetry is all about. So, have a great week. I'm heading back to Kansas this week, but wherever I am, I'll be on YouTube next weekend with more Morning Gym poems, and until then, all the best. Bye now.